It was a crisp New York evening, the kind of night where the city itself seems to breathe, every light flickering like a heartbeat, every footstep echoing against wet pavement. The streets glimmered from a light drizzle earlier in the day, and the reflection of taxis and street lamps painted the asphalt in streaks of gold and amber. Somewhere in the hum of the city, a saxophone played from a distant alley, weaving through the cool air like a secret melody. Keanu Reeves walked quietly beside his family, his mother, silver hair tucked neatly beneath her scarf, his sister, soft-spoken but with a spark in her eyes, and his young nephew, who clutched Keanu's hand with quiet awe at the city's size. They weren't out for anything fancy. No publicity, no spotlight. Just a family dinner. A small promise Keanu had made weeks ago, one he intended to keep despite his busy life. He wore a long, dark coat and simple jeans. No entourage, no flash. To anyone passing by, he looked like an ordinary man, a son, a brother, an uncle, simply sharing an evening with the people who mattered most. But there was a quiet strength in his presence, the kind that didn't need words to be felt. As they approached the restaurant, the golden glow spilling from its windows felt inviting. Laughter, the soft hum of jazz, the faint aroma of garlic butter and baked bread drifting into the street. Keanu held the door open for his family, the gentleman he had always been taught to be. Inside, the space was warm and alive. Candles flickered on every table, glassware sparkled, and the low notes of a jazz trio wrapped around the clinking of cutlery. It was the kind of place built on atmosphere, where every detail whispered class and comfort. His mother's eyes lit up as she looked around. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Keanu smiled, helping her with her chair, replying simply, "You deserve beautiful." For a moment all felt right. The world outside, the fame, the noise, the expectations, disappeared. Here, he wasn't the actor everyone knew. He was just Keanu, a man finding peace in ordinary moments. He reached for the menu, joking lightly with his nephew about ordering the biggest dessert on the list. Laughter rippled across the table, warm, pure, real. In that instant, he felt grounded. The city's chaos melted into something almost poetic, the rhythm of family, the music of togetherness. Yet beneath this calm, something unseen lingered, a small shadow waiting by the door. A storm, not of rain, but of pride and prejudice, soon to break the serenity of their night. Keanu didn't know it yet, but this dinner would become more than a meal. It would become a test. Not of patience or power, but of character. The kind of test that reveals who a person truly is when dignity is challenged and kindness is mistaken for weakness. The moment the door swung open, a subtle shift in the air changed everything. The warmth of the restaurant, the soft jazz, the candlelight, the cozy murmur of evening diners met the cool night air that drifted in behind Keanu and his family. For a heartbeat, it felt seamless. Then came the stare. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood by the entrance, wearing a black security uniform that looked too new, too stiff. His posture was rigid, his expression sharper than it needed to be. The tag on his chest read, R. Davis. He was new, probably filling in for someone, and clearly determined to prove he belonged. Keanu gave a polite nod as he guided his mother inside. "Good evening," he said softly. The guard's eyes flicked from Keanu to his family, from the older woman in a modest coat to the young boy clutching his uncle's arm. His face tightened. "Can I help you?" His tone wasn't welcoming. It was defensive, suspicious. Keanu smiled faintly. "Yes, we have a reservation. Reeves, table for 4. The man didn't look at the list. He didn't even glance toward the host stand. He just smirked, the kind of smirk that carries quiet disdain. "Reservations are for guests who actually dine here." Keanu blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "Excuse me?" The guard folded his arms. "Look, this place isn't for—" He paused, eyes sweeping their simple outfits, his voice lowering to a hiss. "People who can't afford it. You should probably try somewhere else." His nephew's small voice broke the silence. "Uncle, what's he mean?" Keanu's mother placed a gentle hand on her grandson's shoulder, but the damage was done. The jazz still played, but somehow it felt distant, hollow. A few guests had looked up from their tables, whispering. The maitre d' was nowhere to be seen. Keanu kept his voice even. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're just here for dinner." The guard stepped forward, blocking their path completely now. "Dinner? Look around. This isn't a diner. We don't need trouble tonight, so I'm asking nicely. Turn around and leave before I call someone who'll make you." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Keanu didn't move. He just studied the man's face, reading the insecurity behind the aggression. His mother's hand trembled slightly against his arm. He turned toward her, and his voice, when it came, was soft but resolute. "It's all right, Mom," he whispered. "Let's go." The guard blinked, almost surprised that the man didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't demand recognition. He just walked away. As the family turned back toward the door, the faint reflection in the glass caught Keanu's face. Calm, unreadable, but his eyes burned quietly. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. Outside, the cold night felt sharper than before, cutting through the silence like truth through pride. Somewhere behind them, the restaurant's laughter resumed. But something in that place had already changed, even if they didn't know it yet. The night air hit Keanu's face like a wake-up call, cool, sharp, almost cleansing. He stepped aside to let his family walk out first, the city's neon glow reflecting off the glass door behind them. The restaurant that had promised warmth and laughter now stood like a fortress of cold privilege. His mother's shoulders were slightly hunched, her scarf trembling in the wind. His nephew looked up, confused, his young eyes trying to make sense of what had just happened. But before Keanu could guide them farther down the sidewalk, the door behind them swung open again. The voice that followed was dripping with sarcasm and superiority. "Hey, I said get out, not hover around like you belong here." It was the guard again. His tone carried the unmistakable arrogance of someone who mistook authority for power. The laughter and music from inside leaked out into the night, then quickly vanished as the door closed behind him. The sound of the city filled the silence. Passing cars, the faint hum of a subway grate below, and somewhere in the distance, a siren's lonely cry. Keanu turned slowly, his expression calm but unreadable. His family stopped beside him. The guard stepped closer, sneering. "You think just because you wear a fancy coat you can walk in wherever you want? This isn't some cheap cafe. People like you don't fit in there." Keanu's sister stiffened, her voice trembling as she said, "We had a reservation. You didn't even check." The man barked a laugh. "A reservation? What? Under pretend to be rich?" He shook his head. "Save yourself the embarrassment." The words hung in the air, heavy and mean. A few people passing on the sidewalk slowed down, catching fragments of the exchange. Keanu's mother reached out, touching her son's arm, the same gentle gesture she'd used when he was a boy getting scolded for something he didn't do. Her voice was soft, pleading. "Let's just go, dear." Keanu nodded slowly, his jaw tightening for the first time, but his voice, when it came, was measured, calm, almost serene. "You don't know who people are, my friend," he said quietly, "and maybe that's the problem." The guard frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Keanu looked him in the eye. No anger, no pride, only truth. "It means that respect shouldn't depend on what someone wears or how much money they have. It should be automatic until they give you a reason otherwise." For a second, something flickered in the guard's expression. Confusion, maybe guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it came. He pointed toward the street again. "I don't care who you think you are, just go." Keanu exhaled slowly, turned, and placed a reassuring hand on his nephew's shoulder. "Come on," he murmured. They walked away under the watchful glow of the streetlights, each step echoing softly on the wet pavement. Behind them, the guard lingered at the door, his smug grin fading. He didn't yet realize that the man he'd just humiliated was known across the world. Forget. The street outside shimmered beneath a soft drizzle. Streetlights turned the puddles gold, and the cool air carried the scent of rain, car exhaust, and roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. Keanu and his family walked in silence, their footsteps slow and uneven. The restaurant's laughter faded behind them, replaced by the hum of the city that never quite sleeps. Keanu's mother clutched her scarf closer. "You didn't have to walk away so easily," she said quietly. Her voice carried no anger, just disappointment, a quiet ache. "He had no right to speak to us that way." Keanu looked down at her with a faint, almost wistful smile. "Maybe not. But I've learned that pride burns faster than peace, Mom." He reached out and gently wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "We came for dinner, not for a fight." His nephew tugged at his sleeve. "But, Uncle," the boy said softly, "you could have told him who you are. Then he'd be sorry." The innocence in his tone cut deeper than the insult itself. Keanu crouched slightly, meeting the boy's eyes. "That's not how respect should work, buddy. If you have to prove who you are for someone to treat you kindly, then it's not real respect. It's fear." The boy nodded slowly, though his brow furrowed with confusion. Children understand fairness instinctively, but not the cruelty that sometimes lives in adults. They stopped beneath the awning of a small bookstore. The glow from its window painted their faces in warm yellow light. Keanu looked through the glass absently. Rows of old novels, some half open, others stacked unevenly like forgotten dreams. It was quiet there, almost peaceful. And for a brief moment, the world seemed to pause. His sister broke the silence. "It's strange," she murmured. "He didn't even look at us like people. Just like we were in his way." Keanu's gaze softened. "That's what happens when people forget empathy," he said. "They see status, not stories, faces, not souls." The city moved around them. A couple hurrying by, a taxi splashing through a puddle, a busker strumming his guitar beneath a flickering street lamp. Life, indifferent but beautiful, went on. Then, somewhere behind them, the restaurant door opened again. The sound carried faintly over the noise of traffic, hurried footsteps, then a voice calling out, "Wait, Mr. Reeves!" Keanu didn't turn at first. The family exchanged glances. The voice came closer, breathless now. "Mr. Reeves, please, wait!" It was the restaurant manager, his coat half-buttoned, face pale with realization. He had just discovered who the man he'd turned away truly was. The quiet customer he'd lost wasn't some nobody. He was Keanu Reeves, the man whose name could fill theaters, whose kindness filled hearts. Keanu finally turned, calm as ever. His eyes met the manager's, not with anger, but with something far more disarming patience. "I think," Keanu said softly, "you've realized your mistake." And though the words were gentle, the night seemed to hold its breath. The restaurant manager stood in the rain, his breath visible in the chill, a mixture of panic and shame on his face. His neatly pressed shirt was half-tucked, his tie hanging crooked from the rush. He looked nothing like the composed man who usually ran one of Manhattan's finest dining rooms. Tonight, he looked human. Flawed, frightened, and suddenly aware of just how badly he'd misjudged the moment. "Mr. Reeves," he said again, almost tripping over the words. "Please, sir, come back inside. I had no idea." Keanu turned fully now. His family stood beside him, their expressions a blend of confusion and quiet hurt. His mother looked on silently, the boy gripping her hand. His sister's eyes narrowed slightly, not out of anger, but disbelief at how quickly respect could change once a name carried weight. Keanu's voice came low, calm, and clear through the falling rain. "You didn't have an idea because you didn't look beyond what you saw." The manager swallowed hard. "Please, forgive the guard. He's new. He didn't mean—" Keanu interrupted softly. "He meant exactly what he said. That's the problem. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His words cut with quiet precision, sharper than any raised voice could have. The manager's eyes darted toward the restaurant window where diners had begun to notice the scene. Their silhouettes hovered in curiosity, some whispering, others recording through the glass. The guard now stood frozen just inside the doorway, his earlier arrogance replaced by a nervous stillness. Keanu looked past the manager, meeting the guard's gaze through the reflection. There was no hatred in his eyes, just disappointment, the kind that sinks deeper than anger ever could. "Tell me," Keanu said, "would you have treated anyone else that way tonight? A family in plain clothes without a last name that opens doors?" The manager's lips parted, but no answer came. Rain tapped against the awning overhead, each drop punctuating the silence between them. "I'm not angry," Keanu continued, "but what happened in there? That's not just one man's mistake. It's a reflection of how easily we forget to see the person before the status." He paused, glancing at his family. "You owe them an apology, not me." The manager turned to the group, eyes downcast. "Ma'am, I am so deeply sorry. This was wrong." Keanu's mother gave a faint nod, her dignity unshaken. "Respect," she said softly, "costs nothing but means everything." Keanu's nephew looked up at the guard inside, whispering, "It's okay. We forgive you." A hush fell over the street. Even the traffic seemed to fade into the background as the moment settled, Grace standing taller than pride. Then Keanu did something no one expected. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and handed it to the manager. "Order dinner for my family, and for your guard, on me." The manager blinked, stunned. "Sir, Keanu smiled faintly. Kindness teaches louder than punishment. Inside the restaurant, the warmth returned. But it wasn't the same. The hum of conversation had dimmed. The jazz playing from the corner seemed gentler now, more reflective. Every guest had felt the tension ripple through the room moments ago, and now all eyes subtly followed as Keanu Reeves and his family stepped back inside. The manager held the door open with both hands, his expression a mix of gratitude and guilt. The same security guard who had thrown them out earlier now stood by the podium, his hat in his hands, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The arrogance that had once armored him had dissolved, leaving behind something raw, remorse. Keanu's mother walked in first, steady and elegant, despite the ache in her heart. His sister followed, guiding the boy who still looked wide-eyed at the sudden shift in tone. Then came Keanu, calm, quiet, his presence commanding not through power, but through peace. The manager quickly led them to the same table they had reserved earlier, one near the window where the city lights glimmered like distant stars. "Mr. Reeves, please, everything tonight is on the house," he stammered. Keanu shook his head gently. "No, we'll pay for our meal. What's free isn't always what's right." The room went silent again. A couple at the next table looked at each other, visibly moved. A waiter, still young and nervous, whispered to another, "He's really like this in real life?" Keanu smiled faintly, pulling out his mother's chair. "Let's enjoy dinner," he said simply, as if the storm outside and inside had never happened. As the family settled in, the guard approached hesitantly. His hands trembled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you. I shouldn't have—" Keanu looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "You don't need to recognize me," he said softly. "You just need to recognize people." The man froze, his throat tightening. No anger, no sarcasm, just truth, delivered gently, like a mirror reflecting his own mistake. "I'll do better," he managed to say, voice cracking. Keanu nodded. "That's all any of us can promise." The waiter brought out glasses of water, a basket of warm bread. The air began to soften again. Laughter slowly returned to the tables. Even the jazz trio seemed to sense the change, their music swelling with warmth and quiet optimism. Keanu's nephew leaned close to him, whispering, "Uncle, Why did you forgive him so easily? Keanu's gaze drifted to the window, where the city lights shimmered on the wet streets, because holding anger only keeps you in the same place as the person who hurt you, he said. Forgiveness lets you move forward. His mother reached across the table, placing her hand on his. Your father would be proud of you, she whispered. Keanu smiled softly. He taught me that class isn't about what's in your pocket, it's about what's in your heart. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, something even more powerful had begun a ripple of grace that would outlast the night. The plates were now set before them. Warm food, the aroma of butter, herbs, and fresh bread filling the air. Around them, the soft notes of the saxophone drifted like a lullaby, and the city lights shimmered through the window like silent witnesses to everything that had just unfolded. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of what had happened still lingered, not heavy anymore, but thoughtful, like a lesson slowly settling into the soul. Keanu's nephew broke the silence first. Uncle, he said, his voice small but curious. Everyone looked scared when you came back. Were they afraid of you? Keanu smiled, a faint curve of calm understanding. No, buddy, they weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of what they'd done. Sometimes people realize too late how they made others feel. The boy frowned a little. But you didn't shout at them. That's the thing, Keanu replied, looking down at his plate. You don't need to shout to be strong. His mother reached for her glass of water, her eyes glimmering softly in the candlelight. You remind me so much of your father, she said, her voice filled with pride. He was the same, quiet in anger, but loud in kindness. Keanu looked at her, the woman who'd taught him everything about dignity and compassion. He learned that from you, Mom, he said gently. She smiled, that knowing, motherly kind of smile that carried decades of love and pain, of sacrifices made quietly and lessons taught without words. No, she said softly. You've taken it further. You've turned kindness into strength. The waiter approached timidly, placing dishes of pasta and grilled vegetables on the table. If you need anything, sir, please just let me know, he said with genuine respect, not the forced kind. Keanu thanked him kindly, and when the waiter turned away, his mother caught the subtle look of admiration the young man had given her son. You've become someone who makes people reflect just by standing still, she said. Keanu laughed lightly. Or maybe I just walk slowly enough for people to notice their reflection. His sister chuckled. You always had a line ready? But beneath the laughter, there was something deeper. A shared understanding that what had just happened tonight wasn't just a scene in a restaurant. It was a reminder. Keanu took a slow sip of water, then looked out the window again. The city beyond the glass pulsed with life. Taxis flashing, couples walking arm in arm, neon lights flickering over rain-wet streets. You know, he said softly, almost to himself, people talk about fame like it gives you power, but real power is how you treat people when no one's watching. His mother reached across the table, touching his hand gently. That's why you'll never lose yourself, she said. He nodded, eyes glimmering, because no matter where I go, I'll always be your son first. The table filled with quiet smiles and warmth. No spotlight, no applause, just family, peace, and pride. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm. Taxis gliding by in streaks of yellow, streetlights casting halos on puddles left by the rain. Inside the restaurant, laughter and warmth had slowly returned. But at the entrance, under the soft glow of the lobby lights, one man stood motionless, the guard, or Davis. His cap rested on the counter, his hands clenched together as if trying to hold in the weight of regret. The words he had thrown out earlier echoed again and again in his head. You people don't belong here. Each repetition stung sharper than before. Through the glass wall, he could see Keanu Reeves sitting with his family, laughing softly now, relaxed, surrounded by an air of quiet peace that didn't belong to celebrity, but to character. Every so often, someone in the restaurant would glance their way, still amazed that the man they'd seen humiliated earlier had returned not in anger, but with grace. The guard swallowed hard. He had seen pride before. He'd worn it like armor his whole life, but he had never seen humility wielded like power. Not until tonight. He looked down at his reflection in the glass, rain-streaked, tired, and small against the grandeur of the city behind him. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself. His voice cracked. A waitress passing by noticed him standing alone. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded, but his throat was too tight for words. "I just made a mistake," he finally said. She gave him a small smile. "Then maybe it's time to fix it." Her words lingered. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small notepad he used for security notes. Tearing out a sheet, he began to write. His handwriting shook slightly. "Mr. Reeves, I spoke to you with ignorance and disrespect. You showed me kindness instead of pride, and I will never forget it. I'll be better. Not because you're famous, but because you reminded me how a real man carries himself. R. Davis." He folded the note carefully, staring at it for a long moment before slipping it onto the host stand, where the manager could find it later. Then he stepped outside into the night air. The cold felt deserved, cleansing. He leaned against the wall, watching the city move. Every passing stranger now looked different, not as faces, but as stories. Some tired, some joyful, some lost. All human. For the first time in years, he didn't see himself as the gatekeeper. He saw himself as part of the crowd, just another person trying to do better. Behind the glass, Keanu glanced toward the door. Their eyes met for a brief second. Keanu gave a small nod, one of quiet understanding, forgiveness, and respect. The guard nodded back, his chest tightening with emotion. It wasn't fame that changed him tonight. It was grace, the kind of grace that leaves no noise behind, only echoes. By the time dinner ended, the city had settled into that late-hour hush only New York seems to know. When the traffic thins, the sidewalks glisten, and the hum of distant voices becomes a song of its own. The rain had stopped completely, leaving behind streets polished with reflections of lights and motion. Keanu stepped out of the restaurant beside his family. The night air was cool, carrying with it the scent of rain and roasted peanuts from a vendor closing his cart. The glow from the restaurant windows spilled softly behind them, flickering across the puddles like candlelight on water. For a moment, Keanu paused on the sidewalk. He looked back through the glass, not at the diners, not at the decor, but at the people. The guard was still there, standing near the door, his head bowed. The manager had his hand on the man's shoulder, speaking to him quietly. It wasn't reprimand, it was understanding. Something had changed inside that restaurant tonight, and Keanu knew it. His mother tucked her arm into his. "It's late," she said gently. "Let's go home." He smiled, guiding her along the pavement as his sister and nephew followed a step behind. The city lights shimmered against their faces. Somewhere in the distance, a saxophone played again, the same lonely melody they'd heard when they first arrived. Only now it didn't sound lonely anymore, it sounded alive. As they crossed the street, his nephew spoke up. "Uncle, that man, the guard, do you think he'll really change?" Keanu looked down, his expression thoughtful. "I think he already has," he said. "Sometimes all it takes is one moment of being seen, really seen, to make someone want to be better." His sister smiled faintly. "You always find the good in people, don't you?" He shrugged, hands in his coat pockets. "It's there. You just have to look past the noise." They walked quietly for a while, the soft rhythm of their steps blending with the heartbeat of the city. A light breeze rustled the trees lining the avenue, scattering drops of rain from their leaves. At the corner, a homeless man sat beneath a street lamp, his head bowed, a cup beside him half filled with coins. Keanu stopped briefly, reached into his pocket and dropped in a folded bill. The man looked up, startled, and Keanu simply smiled before walking on. No words, just kindness. Behind them, the restaurant lights dimmed as the last customers left. But inside, the story of the night would linger, whispered between waiters, shared between tables, told as a reminder that not every lesson comes with anger, and not every victory needs noise. As the family disappeared down the street, the final image was simple yet powerful. Keanu Reeves walking with his loved ones, the city lights stretching before him like stars reflected on the ground. No fame, no cameras, no applause, just a man whose silence had spoken louder than any spotlight ever could. And in that silence, New York listened.